Hello everyone, it's Shadow Hero and welcome to this long-awaited video that I've been trying to work on and release for the past couple of months. I tried to find a good time to release it, but with Pokemon Presents just concluding, I figured, what a perfect time to get it out there. So yes, if you read the title of this video, that's right, we are going through every single Pokemon from 1 to 151, and I'm going to be discussing my personal favorite, facts, lore, trivia, creepypasta, all that stuff from every Pokemon from Generation 1. And if this video does well, we might just be able to cover every other generation. If you want to see that, hit that like button so we can boost the algorithm, and leave a comment down below as well so I can know you guys are enjoying this type of content. But anyway, not wasting any more time, let's get started, and I hope you brought your snacks because I got to read a lot of text. So starting with number 1, in Pokemon Yellow you were able to attain all of the original 3 main starter Pokemon. However, Bulbasaur requires your friendship level with Pikachu to be at a certain level to attain it. This is unique as friendship was not a mechanic introduced until Generation 2, so because this was an unknown mechanic that the game does not explicitly point out, a lot of players actually miss out on getting Bulbasaur for their team, myself included. The pain. Many have speculated that the gender for Ivysaur in the Super Smash Bros. Series to be female. Although the only thing to support this is the fact that she seems to have a female voice in Japanese. Even though Ivysaur has a deeper voice in English. But hey, I love me my deep voice women. Venusaur has had each of its evolutionary stages make an appearance in the Super Smash Bros. Series. Bulbasaur as a trophy in Melee and Brawl, Ivysaur as a playable character in Brawl and Ultimate, and Venusaur as a stage hazard on the Saffron City stage in the original Smash Bros. Charmander's original artwork had spikes on his back. You can even see this on Blue's Charmander in the Pokemon Adventures manga. In the anime, as soon as Ash's Charmander evolved into Charmeleon, he got a completely change in personality, going from loyal and trustworthy to arrogant and lazy. This behavior was due to the fact that Charmeleon's skill level was higher than that of Ash. These results are pretty similar to what happens in the games. When a Pokemon level exceeds the amount of required badges necessary, that Pokemon becomes disobedient. Charizard is the first Pokemon species to use every single battle gimmick in the anime. Alon's Charizard being able to Mega Evolve, Kiawe's Charizard using the Flying Z, Leon's Charizard Gigantamaxing, and in the latest series, Free's Charizard Terrestrializing. Ash was originally going to pick Squirtle as his first Pokemon. Would have been an interesting timeline had he actually woke up on time. Wartortle's Dex entry states that its tail is a symbol for longevity and it's able to live for 10,000 years. This is based on the Japanese legend of the Minogame, a turtle that lived for 1,000 years and grew a tail made of seaweed. Mega Blastoise, despite having a giant cannon on its back and 2 arm cannons, when it attacks, the animation actually doesn't show anything being fired from those cannons. This was fixed in the latest entry for regular Blastoise, however, it's nice to be reminded that Game Freak were incompetent even back then. Ash's Caterpie marks the first of many in the anime. The first to be captured, the first to evolve, the first to reach its final form, the first to be traded away. Really, Ash? The first to have a confirmed gender, and the first to be released. Ash? What the hell? The first time we saw Caterpie evolve into Metapod, it evolves pretty similar to how caterpillars morph into a cocoon in real life. Did you know? Ash's Butterfree actually makes a brief return appearance after its release. And no, I'm not talking about Pikachu's little flashback moment. In the Japanese opening for the Battle Frontier series, Butterfree along with his partner actually show up, although they never actually appear in any of those episodes. What a damn tease. Ash had actually 2 instances where he came across a Weedle and failed to capture it. The first is in episode 4, Challenge of the Samurai, where he does manage to weaken one, but upon getting distracted, he lets it get away. The second is in episode 161, The Bug Stops Here, the anime debut of the bug catching contest. When the contest begins, Ash manages to come across a Weedle, but another trainer, Casey, manages to quickly attack and capture it before he can do anything. Kakuna's sprite for the Pokemon Red and Blue games actually shows it has pincer-like arms. Many have believed this to be a sprite error, however Kakunas actually do have arms so they can grab onto trees. Despite my fact about Weedle, Ash actually does manage to catch a Beedrill during the bug catching contest, and after winning he was allowed to keep it. However, he decided to give it away to his friend Casey due to her love for black and yellow striped Pokemon. Pidgey has the shortest cry of all Pokemon, lasting at only 0.181 seconds. Remember how Ash was able to catch Pidgeotto very early on in his journey in the Viridian Forest? Didn't even need to capture a Pidgey and evolve it? Well, this is also possible in Pokemon Yellow. There's a 1% chance you can find Pidgeotto at level 9 in the Viridian Forest, even though Pidgey normally doesn't evolve until level 18. Many of Pidgeot's dex entries mentions it's able to reach Mach 2 speed. But if you look at its base stats back then, it's only 90. Even today, compared to everything else, it is not a fast Pokemon. We could have a long discussion about Pokemon pronunciations, and maybe if I do the other generations, I'll talk about ones that drive me nuts. But for my first one, Rattata. Even in the anime, they started calling it Rattata. It wasn't until later on in the series when they for some reason changed it to Rattata. Just listening to it makes me want to pull my ears out. In Generation 8, out of all the Totem Pokemon, Alolan Raticate is the only one that's version exclusive, specifically to Pokemon Moon and Ultra Moon, while Sun and Ultra Sun showcases Gumshoe. In addition, when Alolan Raticate does appear, its cry is actually that of the cry of Gumshoe. Whoopsies! Spearow is known for its aggressive nature and territorial behavior. Makes sense considering a flock of them nearly destroyed Ash and Pikachu minutes into their journey. Although to be fair, I'll be pretty pissed too if I got glocked over the head with a rock. Did you know that same Spearow actually evolved into Fearow and Ash caught it? Just kidding. I'm just trying to see if you're still paying attention. In fact, to wake you up, Ash actually does catch a Fearow, but in the manga. Yes, the manga rendition of Ash's adventures in the Kanto region are somewhat different to the events that take place in the anime. Of course, in the anime, Ash not only chucks a rock at Spearow, but he later fights off that same evolved Spearow with his newly evolved Pidgeot. However, in the manga, Ash's first encounter is with Fearow, and upon striking with Thunderstrike from Pikachu, Ash was able to catch it. Throughout his journey, Fearow ends up becoming one of his most useful and primary flying-type Pokemon. And what happened to Pidgeotto? Well, believe it or not only was it captured off screen, but during a gym battle with Misty, as Ash was about to throw his Pokeball, he finds it empty, with only a note that reads, "I'm beat, off to get some R&R. Don't forget the right, signed, Pidgeotto." Did that wake you up? In the press release for Pokemon Snap, Ekans was actually one of the featured Pokemon in the game. However, it was not present upon full release. Have you ever noticed the pattern on Arbok's chest? Yes, this face pattern actually has multiple variations. The pattern differs between Arbok, and according to lore, it's able to change it depending on its region or to its own desire. My favorite actually being the Dark Arbok from the Team Rocket TCG set. Pokemon Yellow was the first game to feature the unique ability to have your Pokemon follow you on your adventure. This Pokemon, of course, being Pikachu. In Pokemon Fire Red and Sun, Raichu's Dex entry mentions it's able to knock out an Indian elephant, which is weird in itself considering it's mentioning a real-life animal and country. Funny enough, in Legends Arceus, they use the same Dex entry, however, they make mention of Raichu knocking out a Copper Raja instead of an Indian elephant. Sandshrew appears as a spirit in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. What? I didn't say all my facts were going to be super interesting. Both Sandshrew and Sandslash are said to have poisonous claws, similar to how some species of shrew are poisonous. However, what is odd is that they barely learn any poison type moves. I mean, okay, I guess they can learn like a poison jab through a TM, but outside of that, in their base kit, all they got is poison sting. So how poison is this thing? Because with 15 base power, this thing is not that poisonous. Before genders became a mechanic, Nidoran was the first to introduce gender differences. Once evolved, Nidorina loses its ability to breed. This goes for their final evolution as well, making this evolution line the only one to lose their ability to breed, despite the first stage being able to do so. Interestingly enough, in the animated special Pokemon Mewtwo Returns, it is shown that a Nidoqueen and Rhyhorn actually bred and made a baby Rhyhorn and baby Nidoqueen? So either Mewtwo is so powerful that he changed the genetic capabilities of his clones, or someone was drunk while writing the scene and they completely forgot that Nidoqueen can't breed. This goes for the female as well, but you know how the gender symbol is part of Nidoran's name? Well, should you nickname them, the genders will be represented like it does with every other Pokemon. Nidorina is one of the two Pokemon first introduced in a battle in both the anime and games. Although I'm not sure what this trainer is thinking with this matchup. Losing battle there. Already mentioned that Nidoqueen can't breed. Well, you know what can? Nidoking. That's right, that means this big behemoth can breed with this little babby. What is wrong with you people? Clefairy was originally going to be Ash's main partner. So before Pikachu, this little pink fluffball was going to be his first Pokemon and potentially the mascot for Pokemon. Can you imagine that timeline? Pokemon Let's Go Clefairy. Hey you Clefairy. Pokemon Detective Clefairy. There's been a long-running theory that Gengar is actually Clefable's shadow. There's a bit of evidence to support this claim. To how similar their body structures are, to the fact that their typings are opposites being Ghost and Normal, and their Pokédex entries. This theory has lost a bit of traction since Clefable has been changed to a fairy type, but that hasn't stopped people from keeping the connection between them alive. Now stating Gengar might be a dead Clefable, or may not be a literal shadow, but an evil dark half of Clefable, which is supported by the fact that Gengar's name is actually derived from the word double Gengar. Whether or not the developers intended for any of this to be the case, I don't know, but regardless, I love dark theories like this. Alolan Vulpix is the only uninvolved Pokemon to receive a V-Star in the Pokemon TCG. Ninetales is based on the Japanese Kasune, as according to his Dex entries, Ninetales possesses strange supernatural abilities that keep it alive for 1,000 years and can hypnotize and control people, similar to the Kasune legend. Due to Jigglypuff's popularity in the anime, the Super Smash Bros. Developers decided to include her as a playable character, using Kirby as a base. However, she would just barely make the cut when it comes to Super Smash Bros. Brawl. This explains why Jigglypuff's inclusion in the Subspace Emissary is some weird random cutscene. In some of Wigglytuff's earlier appearances, the white portion on his belly did not reach past his mouth. Also, look at its sprite from the Japanese version of Pokemon Red and Green. This Wigglytuff seems some Despite not having eyes, Zubat is actually able to use the move Mean Look. Pokemon Red and Blue is the only mainline game to ever depict Golbat with a huge ass tongue. Though the rest of the games never brought this back, always depicting his mouth as a black void. The last game to ever include the tongue was Pokemon Battle Revolution. I'm gonna be honest with you, I couldn't find anything interesting on this mod. I mean, what am I supposed to say? So to confirm if you're still watching, please leave a fact for artists down below, because I got nothing. It's cute, I guess. I sing cuter. According to Gloom's Dex entry, what looks like drool is actually a sweet nectar used to attract his prey. Which is odd, because there are many other Dex entries that make mention the smell of it is atrocious, so what exactly is being attracted? A Grimer or a Trubbish? I mean, Bulbasaur in the anime liked one, but maybe he just likes it trashy. In Pokemon Coliseum, Vileplume has one of the longest faint animations. It deflates, sits on the floor for a few seconds until that final petal twitches before it finally returns to its Pokeball. In Generation 1, Poison type moves were actually super effective against Bug types. Meaning back then, Paris' evolution line was the only one to ever have 3 4-time weaknesses. Sticking to type weaknesses, if for some reason you have dry skin on Parasect, the effectiveness of fire type moves will be 5 times. Did you know? Venonat in its evolved form were not included in any of the regional or national decks since the release of Pokemon Crystal. It wasn't until Scarlet and Violet when they finally came back as part of the Indigo Disc expansion. Venomoth's early artwork featured yellow spots on the back of its wings. In Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Red and Blue Rescue Team and in the Switch remake, there's a scene where Diglett mentions it has feet and how it feels like it's floating. Although I'm not sure how exactly they know what it feels like to float, but hey, the more you know. Alolan Diglett and Alolan Dugtrio actually share 2 abilities with Wiglett and Wugtrio, those being Sandveil and either Gooey or Tangled Hair, the latter 2 having the same effect, lowering speed upon contact. Meowth can be considered sort of rivals with that of Pikachu. Their dex numbers are opposites, Pikachu being 25, Meowth being 52. They were opposite sides on the anime, and they're a literal depiction of a cat chasing a mouse. Did you know Giovanni's Persian, while most would immediately think of it as just his pet being by his side, has actually done battle. In the episode Meloetta and the Undersea Temple, Giovanni actually battles Ash, with Persian knocking out Pikachu with Power Gem. It's also worth mentioning in the games, Giovanni uses Persian in every single battle in Pokemon Yellow, and in the first 2 battles in Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. Afterwards, you can see Persian standing by his side during the gym battle. Psyduck was actually being considered to be the counterpart to Let's Go Pikachu. However, they ultimately decided with Eevee as Psyduck was too similar of a color to Pikachu and it would have been hard to distinguish the two. Thank God. We don't need no Let's Go Psyduck. I'm sorry Matsuda for crapping on your favorite mon. You would think that Golduck would be a much more preferable name to Psyduck considering, you know, gold being a close color palette to yellow. So was this a translation error? Actually no. Gold was actually used to represent psychic abilities. This is why the Marsh badge, which translates to gold badge in Japanese, is given at the Saffron City Gym, and why gold gummies are extremely useful for psychic type Pokemon in the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games. That's one mystery solved, but that doesn't explain why these two are not dual typings. Like, can these things just make sense for once? In Pokemon Ultra Sun, Mankey's Dex entry states the following. The smallest of things could cause it to lose its temper. Because it doesn't hold in its stress, this Pokemon can live a long time. So does that mean I can live a long time if I just lash out at everything? In Pokemon Sun, Primate's Dex entry is rather dark. Well, maybe it was. It has been known to become so angry that it dies as a result. Its face looks peaceful and deaf, however. Like I said, dark at the time, but at least now we have an idea of what Primate looks like when it does die from anger. Although I don't know if I would call this face peaceful, but what do I know? Most representations of Growlithe show it paired up with the Pokemon Police. It is speculated that Arcanine at some point was meant to be a legendary Pokemon. Many have used this portrait from episode 2 Pokemon Emergency as an indication of that. As you can see, Arcanine's portrait is next to Moltres, Zapdos, and Articuno. Purely speculation, nothing confirmed, but it's interesting to think about. Off the top of your head, who's that Pokemon? If for some reason you guessed Poliwhirl, I don't know how you could, then like Ash, you're wrong. Poliwag's swirl pattern on his body actually starts on the right side. However, upon evolving to Poliwhirl, the direction of the swirl changes. Poliwhirl's sprite from Pokemon Gold and Silver and Ruby and Sapphire features his gloves with separate fingers. However, any other sprite or model shows it as mittens. In Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver, a man in Celadon City with a Poliwrath says he hopes it would evolve into a frog Pokemon one day. Probably thinking of Politoed, but yeah, I'm sorry my guy, you're a little late for that. If you recall this character, Mira, who got lost in a cave in Generation 4, while she had a Kadabra in the games, in the anime she had an Abra. So why the change? This is most likely due to the fact that the Pokemon Company could not use Kadabra in the anime at this time. Which goes on to my next fact. In November 2000, an Israeli-British magician named Aaron Geller sued Nintendo. This was due to the fact that he believed Kadabra was a depiction of him. Because of this, the Pokemon Company avoided any use of Kadabra as a precaution until the lawsuit was settled. Such as what I mentioned with the anime with Mira, and even the TCG not having a Kadabra card since the Skyridge release in 2003. Kadabra would not make any appearance until almost 20 years later, where in 2020, Aaron Geller lifts his lawsuit and apologizes to all Pokemon fans for his decision. Kadabra finally makes his return in the anime in episode 7 of the Pokemon Evolution series and the TCG as part of the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet 151 set. Alakazam has several dex entries that make mention that its brain continuously grows inside the longer it lives. As a result, it needs to use telekinesis to maintain its head's position to prevent it from breaking its own neck. There's some twisted people working at Game Freak, I swear. Several of Machops' dex entry mentions how it uses other Pokemon as a test to its strength. From lifting up Gravelers to throwing Geodudes to even challenging Makuhita. In the official Pokemon handbook, Machoke is described as a bit of a narcissist. Quoted, likes his own body way too much. Sometimes it's too busy looking at himself in the mirror to train. However, this contradicts his dex entry in Pokemon Stadium where it mentions, although it's incredibly strong, it's always modest. Consistency? What's that? In Generation 7, Machamp can be used as a ride Pokemon, performing Machamp's shove. It will hold the player while using its other arms to move rocks out of the way. A similar position of riding can be seen in Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. Should you have Machamp as the following Pokemon, it will hold the player along with their partner. God, I miss unique animations for following Pokemon. Game Freak, you lazy, incompetent fuck! Ever wonder what Bellsprout's egg looks like? Them lips though. The TCG Jungle Weeping Bell card, you can actually spot a real life bird laying on top of it. In the anime, James actually owned 2 Victory Bells. The first he dropped off as a weeping bell in a daycare center where it later evolved. Sometime afterwards, his group comes across that Magikarp salesman and he forcibly had to trade his victory bell for a weeping bell. Supposedly because that weeping bell had a sweet scent that was really strong in attracting Pokemon. During a battle with Ash, it evolved into Victory Bell, which I don't know how it did without a Leaf Stone, but whatever. But it began to attack Jesse in a similar way to how the first one attacked James, and it literally got kicked out. He ended up bumping into the first one after the salesman kicked his out as well because it wasn't listening. Both ended up falling for each other. It's funny how love works. The anime episode 19, Tentacool and Tentacruel, several changes were made to the dub as the previous episode, episode 18, initially never aired outside of Asia. And what was this episode? Beauty and the Beach. This episode featured James cross-dressing as well as wearing inflatable breasts, which as you can imagine wasn't deemed appropriate for the Western audience. Without this episode, Ash never destroyed Matilda's restaurant, so unlike in the original where he apologizes to Nastina, mistaking her for her cousin and her getting upset, he instead just makes a comment about needing to get a ride back to the mainland. Similarly, Team Rocket never meet Brutilda, so instead of asking if Nastina is her cousin, they simply make a comment about her hair, and they also get blasted. Episode 19 was actually banned for a period of time. This was as a result of the 9/11 attacks, and the episode was pulled from the air as it depicted Tentacruel destroying several buildings. What is odd is that we can still see the same scene in the opening, but oh well. In Super Smash Bros. Melee, Geodude is the last new Pokemon to appear on screen on the Pokeflow stage. After it leaves, there will be no new Pokeflows for a few seconds until Squirtle pops up and restarts the cycle. Graveler's sprite in Pokemon Red and Blue actually depicts him only having 4 limbs. This was corrected in Pokemon Yellow. Alolan Golem and its pre-evolutions are the only ones to have the ability Galvanize. In before this video becomes outdated. Galarian Ponyta is categorized as the unique horn Pokemon. Get it? Unique horn? Unicorn? Moving on. This thing is ugly. Can that just be the fact? Does anyone disagree? Why doesn't this thing have at least wings? Let's talk about the Cantonian version because I can't stand the Galarian one. And that's a fact. Obviously, with flames on its body, you would expect it to be very hot and burn you if you try to touch it. Well, according to the anime, once Rapidash and Ponyta grow to trust someone, the flames actually give off no heat and are actually rather cool. You know what isn't cool? This thing! Slowpoke has several dex entries that state that its reaction to pain is delayed and even a bite to its tail, it won't react to it until an entire day. However, in Pokemon Snap, we see a Shelder bite Slowpoke's tail and it immediately reacts. Did you know that Slowpoke can actually devolve? When a Shelder does clamp onto Slowpoke's tail, the Shelder transforms, resulting in an evolution. Well, if one were to remove Shelder from Slowpoke's tail, he will revert back into a Slowpoke. I imagine this being pretty difficult though, because would you look at the teeth on that thing? In Pokemon Snap and in Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Red and Blue Rescue Team, a pair of Magnetites can be seen joined together. However, in Snap, if you take a picture, it is actually still listed as Magnetite. In Mystery Dungeon, it is stated to be a failed evolution due to a lack of a third Magnetite. There are very few instances of shiny Pokemon making an appearance in the anime. One that you probably glance over is this shiny Magneton under the ownership of Jackson. What is weird is that this Magneton did not give off the shiny sparkly effect that other Pokemon would end up doing when it came out of the ball. Even though Ash already caught Noctowl in the same generation and it has this effect. The signature item for Farfetch'd, Leek, actually had a name change. It was originally called Stick. Doduo and its evolution are the only flying type Pokemon to only have a head and legs as part of its body. Despite this Pokemon can still use the move Fly. Don't ask me how it can fly, I can just confirm that they do. Dodrio's dex entry states it's able to run at 40 miles per hour. Even though Doduo's states it's able to run at 60 miles per hour. Even though Dodrio's base speed stat is faster than that of Doduo. Seriously, does anyone writing this stuff ever look at what's already written? Seal is the only non-ice type Pokemon that can have Ice Body as an ability. At the same time, it's also the only one to benefit from the hail immunity that Ice Body gives, considering Ice-type Pokemon naturally have this immunity. It is said at night when Dugong hunts, one of its prey is Wishy-Washy. I imagine it's just chowing down on a single one, right? Because you see what they look like when they school up? I don't think Dugong wants that smoke. Grimer has had an interesting change made to one of his TCG cards in the Team Rocket set. This is the card that we got, but this is what the Japanese card looks like. As you can see, this one clearly shows Grimer looking up at what it appears to be a girl's skirt. Classic Japan. However, the artist apparently denied the English change was due to this, which is cap. Because, I mean, why else would you make this change? Also, just for funsies, Poison Gas in the Japanese card makes a defending Pokemon poison. However, in the English release, they changed it to being asleep. Which of course doesn't make sense, but who cares about that when we have a Pokemon trying to get his peep on? A Alolan mug may be based on an oil silk, particularly the rainbow colors that are produced when a thin layer of oil floats on top of water. This phenomenon is called thin film interference. In addition, oil spills are a major threat to ecosystems in our world's oceans, particularly in Hawaii, which so happens to be where Alola is based on. In Pokemon Snap's Shelter can be seen actually floating and moving through the air, even though nowhere else is it ever stated or represented it can even do this. Cloyster's sprite in Pokemon Red and Blue has its head and its shell positioned completely differently from any other depiction. It could just be a top-down view or Cloyster's looking on his side, but even the texture of the shell is off. Especially that spike that's normally on his head, like that's nowhere to be found. Speaking of Cloyster, there's been a theory that Ghastly is actually a dead Cloyster. Although there's barely anything to support this theory besides the fact that they both share a similar head and eye shape, and they just so happen to be next to each other on the national decks. It is interesting though. Keeping the theory train going, Haunter could at some point possess the Pokeball, resulting in the creation of Voltorb. What supports this theory? Well, their eyes for one, they have a pretty similar shape. Where you can catch them, the power plant is actually located pretty close to the Pokemon Tower. Also, Voltorb tend to explode out of anger. This could be Haunter trapped and exploding trying to escape. Again, this is just a theory, nothing confirmed, but it is fun to think about. Mega Gengar actually has feet, and this can be seen in Generation 7 when your opponent recalls or sends out Gengar. In Pokemon Tournament, these feet are not normally visible. Instead, when Gengar jumps, it will have a portal beneath it. However, there is a chance you can spot those feet if you happen to glitch through the floor. The anime actually features a unique Onix known as Crystal Onix. While the anime doesn't provide an exact reason as to where or how this Onix came to be, we do see what makes it special. Besides the fact that its body is obviously made of crystal, it does seem to have a resistance to water as it is shown to naturally be swimming and to take water attacks with ease. It does seem to have a weakness to fire type attacks, so maybe it has a type change to either ice or steel. Sadly, we may never know considering this Onix never made a return appearance in the anime or in any of the games. Besides fan games, Luminescent Platinum actually includes Crystal Onix as a catchable Pokemon. Although they decided to make it rock and ice. Yeah, not exactly resisting water devs, but you know, it's your fan game, you guys do what you want. Several of Drowsy's dex entries state he's able to show dreams to others. This ability can actually be seen in Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Time and Darkness, where initially a Drowsy acts as a villain, kidnapping an Azurill. Later on, this Azurill ends up falling asleep and stuck in a nightmare, and with the help of this same Drowsy, the player's team is actually sent into Azurill's dream. There's actually a creepypasta involving Hypno called Hypno's Lullaby. There's a dex entry in Pokemon Fire Red reused in Pokemon X, in which it states the following. It carries a pendulum-like device. There once was an incident in which it took away a child it hypnotized. This same dex entry could have been the inspiration for this lullaby, which I won't be reading to you because this video is long enough as it is. But the premise of this whole poem is fascinating and certainly creepy, with Hypno, kidnapping children and ultimately their fate being unknown. By now it's pretty obvious how Pokemon Yellow is highly based on the anime, and as such, besides the Sea Foam Islands, Krabby's encounter rate is actually 70%, as opposed to Red and Blue, having an encounter rate ranging from 20% to 50%. This increase in percentage is likely due to how Ash actually owned a Krabby in the anime. Speaking of Ash's Krabby, in his battle debut, it actually uses every single one of its known moves, for a total of 8 moves. How 8? Well, this is because on top of the moves it knew as a Krabby, when it evolves into Kingler, it gains a whole set of new moves in the same episode, making Kingler also the only one of Ash's Pokemon to get the most new moves in one episode. The Shadow Voltorb in Pokemon XD Gala Darkness is actually missable for players that lose to Mirror B in the first battle in the Cave Pokespot, as there's not a flag to make it respawn like other Shadow Pokemon. This will lock the player out of catching Voltorb, and as a result also lock them out of catching Shadow Dragonite, since to catch Dragonite, the player is required to catch every other Shadow Pokemon. Both in Pokken Tournament and the Smash Bros. Series, Electro uses the same move, Explosion. In Pokemon Red and Blue, the leader in Execute is represented to be much larger in size compared to the others. Exeggutor marks another rare circumstance where it can actually devolve. Should one of his heads grow too big in size, it would fall off, and it will result in it diverting back into Execute. We all know how Cubone wears the skull of his dead mom. Well, in episode 2 of Pokemon Origins, we can see Marowak protecting Cubone, and clearly that Marowak is alive. So Cubone is wearing the dead skull of something. Answers we may never know. According to his next entry in Pokemon Ultra Moon, the flames Alolan Marowak uses are cursed. Should these flames strike anyone, it will spread around them and no amount of water will be able to remove them. We got some Amaterasu flames going on here. While Hitmonlee can obviously be a reference to Bruce Lee, it actually also has a similar reference to his Japanese name, Sawamura, referencing a famous Japanese kickboxer, Tadashi Sawamura. Planning on me saying something for Hitmonchan's name too? Wrong! I actually want to bring up Hitmonchan's evolutionary requirement. To get Hitmonchan, Tyrogue's defense stat needs to be higher than its attack stat when it reaches level 20. Despite the fact that Hitmonchan's attack stat is higher than his defense stat, making this not only annoying to get, but to Eevee train as well. And this is why we PK Hex out here. I mean, what? Lickitun's name is actually misspelled as Lickitung in the Kanto Pokerap. Also, Lickitung just happens to be Roger's base favorite Pokemon. In the anime, Coffin was mentioned to first be discovered in a public bathhouse. However, in the Team Rocket TCG set for Coffin, it states it was first discovered in a weapons factory. So which one is it? I mean, this is not to say that Pokemon never has any contradiction. I mean, what kind of idiot would think that? In Pokemon Legends Arceus, the building of the Galaxy Hall resembles Galarian Weezing, despite the fact that this Pokemon is unattainable in the game. Rhyhorn racing is a thing introduced in Pokemon X and Y and in the anime. It's a shame that we never actually got a minigame for this in X and Y. Though, it does make me think, we've seen Pokemon racing before. Imagine if we were to get a racing Pokemon game. In an interview with Kenji Shigemori, Rhydon was one of the first Pokemon ever created. This is supported by the fact that in early concept arts for Capsule Monsters, Rhydon is featured. In Pokemon Legends Arceus, if you happen to get injured and a Chansey is nearby, the Chansey will react and go to check on you. Although they won't actually heal you, and once you fully recover, they will run away. This is why Legends Arceus is the absolute GOAT, for cool little details like this. In the Pokemon Red and Blue beta, Tangela was originally known as Medusa, a name derived from the Greek mythological character Medusa. A few of Kangaskhan's early dex entries specifically mention females in his description. But as far as we know, Kangaskhan can only be females, so it's interesting why it points out the females, indicating or implying there may have at some point been male Kangaskhan's, although this has never been seen in Pokemon in any way. Pokemon Red and Blue official artwork shows Horsey actually had 2 fins. They even make a reference to this in the anime episode 42, Alola Kanto, in the Sun and Moon series. Seadra's Eevee spread is 1 point in defense and 1 point in special attack. This is the only Pokemon to share this unique Eevee spread. In the Super Smash Bros. Series, Goldeen was always seen to come out of the Pokeball using Splash. Yet this Pokemon is actually incapable of learning this move in any of the Pokemon games. And you can argue that maybe it's not using Splash and it's just flapping around on the ground like it did in the anime, but really makes you wonder, why didn't they just decide to use Magikarp instead? Come on, Sakurai! Seeking and Goldeen were able to learn Waterfall before this move ever became an HM. In the data for Pokemon Gold and Silver, Staryu was given egg moves, those being Aurora Beam, Barrier, and Supersonic. However, Staryu and its evolution are both gender unknown, meaning there's no legitimate way they can even attain these moves. Speaking of their gender, Staryu and Starmie were both capable of learning Attract. However, like I mentioned, they're both gender unknown, so using this move in battle will end up doing nothing. But we can fix that now, right? Like, you don't have to identify as a particular gender to gain attraction. What the hell am I thinking? The Pokemon Company can barely fix their crap now. You think they would bother with this? Despite having Mr. in his name, Mr. Mime can either be male or female. This discrepancy is mostly due to the fact that his Japanese name, Barade, does not reference his particular gender. Keep in mind also in Generation 1, genders were not introduced, so the localization team thought nothing of it. Funny thing is that Nob Ogasawara, the translator for all the core Pokemon games up to Platinum, makes mention how he was worried about the English localization for Mr. Mime. Quoted as saying if they make sequels and they give genders to Pokemon, we're going to be hooped. Not to be confused with Hoopa. Scyther is the only Pokemon to share its total base stats with its 2 evolutions, being 500 across all 3. On January 5, 2000, an article was published by Carol Boston Weatherford criticizing Jinx as a racial stereotype. This article was released just a few weeks after Jinx made his anime debut in the Christmas episode Holiday Hijinks. This article ended up going viral, resulting in a large amount of complaints from parents. Following the backlash, the Pokemon Company made visual changes to Jinx, changing it from black to purple in the games and anime, including its episode debut. However, this edited episode never had an English dub, so while the original did air in the US, the edited version never did, thus technically making it a banned episode. Electabuzz is the only one within its evolution line that does not physically represent a power outlet. Like its head is shaped like a power plug, while Electivire's back pattern looks like a power socket. Magmar debuted in the anime episode 58, Riddle Me This, under the ownership of Blaine. He used it in the gym battle against Ash, seemingly winning the first round. The second round pitted Magmar against Charizard, where Magmar fell victim to Charizard's first iconic visual representation of Seismic Toss. Several of Pinsir's dex entries mentions how it uses its pincers to grab and hold onto enemies, and it won't let go until they're torn in half. I guess Ash wasn't too far off from what he was imagining happening to his Metapod. Tauros is the first Pokemon to have more than one regional form within the same region. This of course being Paldea. In addition, the Blaze breed Paldean Tauros is the first firefighting Pokemon to not be an evolution of a starter Pokemon. In Hobbytown, the area where Magikarp Jump takes place, Magikarp can appear in a variety of forms. Their scales range in colors such as gray, black, blue, purple, pink, violet, apricot, brown, to the well-known shiny palette, gold. Gyarados is the first shiny Pokemon to be introduced as part of the game's plot. In Generation 2, when a Pokemon uses Surf outside of Pikachu, your sprite will be depicted as Lapras. Also in Pokemon Crystal, your trainer's gender will actually determine what the color of your Lapras looks like. Ditto was actually planned to appear as a Pokeball Pokemon in Super Smash Bros. Melee. Within the code, one of the files lists Metamon as one of the Pokemon. Metamon, of course, being Ditto's Japanese name. Through hacks, Ditto can be summoned within the game, however, it simply says Metamon and disappears. Ditto will finally make his debut as a Pokeball Pokemon in Ultimate, where it does what you would expect. It transforms into the player that released them, and it fights for a brief time. In Pokemon Let's Go, while both Pikachu and Eevee are given special exclusive moves, only Eevee has 8 moves to choose from. This makes Eevee the one Pokemon to have the largest exclusive move pool, especially if you include moves such as G-Max Cutter from its Gigantamax and Extreme Evo Boost from its Z move. In addition, the 7 Let's Go moves are tailored to each of Eevee's evolution, while the 8th VV Volley is a normal type and it can occur anytime during battle, allowing Eevee to technically have access to 5 attack moves. In Pokemon Coliseum XD Gala Darkness and Battle Revolution, when Vaporeon is present in battle, it will have a constant white mist or a flurry of snow surrounding its body. This is not present nor does this occur in any other games, and the whole reason for this addition is still unknown. Do you know? In Pokemon Yellow, your rival's Eevee evolution is actually determined by you, the player. There are 2 battles at the beginning of the game with your rival. Should your rival win both battles, their Eevee will evolve into a Jolteon. If you win both battles, it will become a Vaporeon. And if you win one or lose or skip the other, it will turn into a Flareon. In Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, Flareon is the only one that's incapable of swimming for obvious reasons. Every other evolution can actually be seen swimming, however Flareon needs to use a platform when in battle on top of water. Porygon's first appearance in the episode Electric Soldier Porygon has become one of the most infamous episodes to ever air in Japan. This episode involves Ash and his friends assisting with the Pokemon Center's Pokeball transmitting device, and to do this they would digitally send into the machine. During a confrontation with a computer virus, missiles are fired at our heroes, and in the chaos, Pikachu uses Thunderbolt to destroy the missiles, resulting in multiple flashing visual effects that include photosensitive epileptic seizures in a substantial amount of Japanese viewers. More than 600 children were sent to the hospital, and the Pokemon anime was put on a 4-month hiatus. By the time it came back, not only was this episode pulled from rotation and banned, but Porygon was completely removed from the anime, even though it was Pikachu's electric attack that actually caused the flashing strobe effect. Omniknight's main predators were Archeops and Creepypastas. Many of Omnistar's Dex entries states that the reason it became extinct was due to the large shell on its back making it too slow to catch its prey. I guess it just never rained back in the day. Kabuto's design consists of a mix of the extinct trilobite and the still living but considered living fossil horseshoe crab. Kabutops as well as Aerodactyl has skeletal sprites in Pokemon Red and Blue and Fire Red and Leaf Green. We know how Pokemon takes inspiration from other sources, right? Well, did you know that someone took inspiration from Aerodactyl? A genus of Pterosaurus took on the name Aerodactylus. Pokemon Sleep is a sleeping app that primarily focuses around Snorlax, where you can feed it food and increase the chances of finding other Pokemon while tracking your sleep. For those that play, did you know that the mat Snorlax is sleeping on has a striking resemblance to one of the mats available in the secret bases in Generation 3? Articuno along with Zapdos and Moltres have actually all combined into one Pokemon in the Pokemon Adventures manga. This is all due to Team Rocket's doing, as they were trying to create the most powerful Pokemon, as you can imagine. Ultimately, they were able to combine all 3 legendary birds together into this monstrosity named the Visor. This fused Pokemon would not stay like this forever though, because after a combined attack from our heroes, the Visor separates and the 3 legendary birds fly back into the wild. When comparing type advantages, Zapdos has an advantage against both Articuno and Moltres. However, when you look at the Galarian forms, Zapdos ends up having the disadvantage against the other 2. In Pokemon Snap, Moltres, Zapdos, and Articuno were all shown to be hatched from eggs. Despite the fact that they're gender unknown and cannot breed, something made these eggs. It could have been Logia, but it's also gender unknown. But then again... Nope, we're not there yet. Dratini actually debuted in the anime episode 35, The Legend of Dratini. This episode features the Safari Zone and how it is protected by the dragon Pokemon Dratini. Unfortunately, this episode never aired outside of Asia due to the excessive use of firearms. I mean, good lord, Ash literally gets a gun pointed straight at his head. But, I mean, I don't know, that doesn't make sense because guns are okay here, but they're not okay here. You know what? I don't know, nonetheless, the removal of this episode caused a major plot hole as to how and where Ash managed to catch 30 Tauros. Dragonair can actually fly by extending and enlarging the wings on its head. It's even shown in the anime to be able to carry a trainer. Despite this, in the games, it actually can't learn the move Fly. In the Orange Islands, Ash vs Drake, Drake's Dragonite uses 10 different types of attacks. Those being Water Gun, Ice Beam, Slam, Dragon Rage, Thunderbolt, Body Slam, Skull Badge, Agility, Thunder, and Hyper Beam. I don't know how this man did it if he just tossed in TMs in the middle of the battle, but that Dragonite is OP as fuck. In Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal, Mewtwo is programmed to always be carrying a Berserk gene. What is weird though is that Mewtwo can't actually be attained in these games without trading it over. And even if Mewtwo was catchable, this item would be used up immediately. Why? According to the item's description, the Pokemon holding this item consumes it when it first enters the battle, raising its attack stack by 2 and leaving it confused for a total of 256 turns, essentially making this item unattainable. So the only way to attain this item will be outside of Cerulean Cave, which of course is where you can catch Mewtwo. Did you know Mew was added extremely late in development? We're talking 2 weeks prior to the release of Pokemon Red and Green. Initially, Mew was never meant to be added. This was largely due to the fact that there was not enough memory in the original game's data. However, after removing the debug features used for development, enough space was left to allow for the inclusion of Mew. What is funny is that they were told not to make any more additions to the game at this point. However, Mew was ultimately added with Nintendo having no clue and with no intended way for the players to attain it. But funny again, due to a glitch, players were able to find and catch Mew. And that is it. That's all my favorite facts, lore, trivia, theories, everything related to Pokemon of Generation 1. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I truly do. I busted my butt trying to get this out for you guys. And I actually had a lot of fun just looking up all these facts, and there's some stuff that I just refreshed my memory on, and things that I didn't even know about, which was amazing. I had so much fun doing this, and hopefully you got that same feel watching it. But please do consider hitting that like button so we can boost that algorithm, get my videos out there. I'm hoping if this does really well, we can do the other generations. But please also leave a comment down below. Let me know some of your favorite facts that I pointed out, or if you have your own personal ones. I would love to see what you guys come up with. Maybe there's something I didn't even find and I just found a new favorite. Also hit that subscribe button and the bell notifications to get notified on when my videos come out. I would greatly appreciate it. It would help me out tremendously. But thank you again so much for watching. Whatever you have, day or night, make sure it's a good one. Take care of yourselves, and as always, until next time, bye bye.